vertebrae through the years and so forth. But I, I just I just gotta say that I'm very fortunate. Yeah,
One
eat
of
a
the
lot of chocolate.
That's, you know what? I do a lot of stuff with vitamins and supplements, and let me tell you something.
I like to know more about that because I think that's what keeps my son-in-law over here says I don't know, but I said that guy keeps going, and he said I know it's those vitamins he's taking.
Well, you and I can have another discussion on that one because I'll be glad to help because I consult with a vitamin company in Miami Lakes, and we make over 1,000 items. So it's some people don't, it's like chiropractors. Some people believe in them, some people don't, So it's whatever fits your boat.
Yeah. Oh, I think you can overdo all that stuff, but you also got to keep thinking there are things out there that will help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even or Family Dollar has, even those cheap places have it.
They do, because I sell it to them.
That's the reason I said that. That's the reason I said that.
Yeah. I was thinking about several things I wanted to ask you. But one of the main things coming out of the gate, I wanted to ask you is when the football team in Don K went to Ohio Wesleyan and they won that state championship game. And what I wanted to ask you was, here we played that game on a Friday, and in 24 hours, turned around, Pleasant had to open up the basketball season against Marian Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to a bunch of your players, and I get various answers. But do you remember that time?
Well, I remember it happened.
Yeah. And so there was no practice?
No. Marian Catholic wanted to cancel the next game. They didn't want us to play. But my feeling was I didn't want to take off a couple of weeks and then have all these other teams playing basketball, and we're sitting there just practicing. I thought it would do us more good to get right in there to the swing of things. And then the fact that we won that first game just kept the kids fired up. And
so did you think that was like really kind of interesting how here they are?
Oh yeah, that's a rare thing to happen. That doesn't happen very often that you play the game right after. But we play that on Saturday night after we played on Friday or something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then you beat them pretty bad.
Well, that was too. And the sad part was that the coach, I can't think of his name right now, but he was mad at me for playing that game. I didn't realize that till later. He was mad at me, and I don't know why, but I just wanted to play basketball. You got to play the game to find out what you got and how you're going to do.
Yeah, and I heard from your players that the same thing. So that fit. They were all in. Your team said, "Let's play it."
Yeah.
But Marian Catholic was the one that was basically resisting.
Yeah.
To play that game. Yeah.
I think we came from behind. I think we were down. I think we came from behind and won. I don't remember now, but won pretty handily after it was all over. But
yeah, as I think I checked it out, I think you beat them 45-29. It was not a well-played game.
Oh, I don't imagine it was. Yeah. I don't remember that. All I remember is it's a W.
That's right. One of many that year.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that the year the 71 team leading up to that 73. And obviously you had guys that were sophomores that were playing on that team. You had Terry, and you had Dave. You had Dave Biggerstaff. You had Paul Rollin, and you guys were on a streak, and you played Fort Recovery in the state finals, and your recollection of that game were they just way better than you?
We probably weren't as good as to be to the state finals. That we just were a bunch of good kids, and we never dreamed of going to the state finals. No one from Pleasant or in Marion County had gone like that.
Right.
But kind of the key to that was I didn't realize, I don't think, how good my two guards were until we started getting to the tournament. Biggerstaff and Roland were just a lot better than they were given credit for being.
Right.
And the young kids, King and Mock and Fink and Ballinger, those kids, they were just good, hard-working young kids, and they didn't know they were underclassmen. They just kept playing.
Yeah.
But the strange thing about that was we played man for man most of the year. We came down. I think our last game, if I remember right, was with Bucyrus, and it was a high-scoring game. I think it was in the 92s to 88 or something like that. And I just sat down and said to myself, if we're going to win any tournament games, we've got to play better defense than that.
Mm-hmm.
And we started playing zone. And so I don't know if you want to hear all this stuff or not.
I do. This is
We started playing zone, and Doug was a big help.
Right.
And then somebody had to go and scout these teams, so Doug ended up being the guy to go and scout them. And he'd come back, he'd scout somebody, and I'd say, well, what did they do against man for man? Well, I don't know, Coach. All they played was zone. The other team played zone. Well, this is what they do against the zone. So we played our zone, started playing zone. And we did that the whole tournament. Basically never played zone until we got into the tournament. But the kids were pretty fundamentally sound man for man. And so when we went to zone, and Doug kind of knew what the other team was going to do, we just kept winning. Now, the last game, we didn't have any scout. Doug couldn't scout that team. And I still say that was a big reason. We did not know there's no way when your team's miles away from you, you don't know anything about them. And
Right.
So we were not probably prepared for them. That was much my fault as anybody, because I didn't know anything about them. And then they got ahead of us and so forth.
And then the following season, you had a good season. But you lost in the district finals
How
to
do you know all this stuff?
Fisher Catholic. I remember all this.
I'll tell you what. Now you're going to get me on the spot here that I'm going to have you don't record this stuff, but that I thought was my best team ever. I thought that was my best team.
And that's what I wanted to talk to you about, because if you recall, I think you were 1 or 2 seed.
I don't remember that. And when I say my best team, as it turned out, when you won the state tournament undefeated, only team in the state undefeated, you don't say that somebody with your team before that was better than them.
Right.
I'm not trying to say that. But I just thought that team should have gone to the state. And you know how coaches are. They always have excuses, this and that, and the referees and that. I can't think back, as much as I complained about officiating, I can't think of the officials beating us only one game, and that was the Lancaster Fisher game. And I will stand up today and say that game was stolen from us. Now, you don't understand why, but I explain that to you, too.
I remember that game. There was a kid, a hot shot shooter, Greg Romano.
That's right.
And he was just burying everything, and all of a sudden, he basically took over that game because of that. And I remember that.
Well, if you remember right, at halftime, we had them beaten. And we come out to the third quarter. Now, I've never said this to anybody, only 2 or 3 people. And so I don't necessarily need this to be told. But the guy one of the officials was a good referee. We'd have him for the last 4 or 5 years. We'd have him for 1 or 2 games because he was a good referee. And he was always very complimentary of our team. And after the game, he would say, there was things that we did. He was really. So we ended up having him in the final game. And I think, man, this is good because he's a good referee.
Mm-hmm.
Well, come out the second half, and he called a couple fouls on Terry King. And Terry King was this far from the center. I mean, he was that far from him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got a 5-second inbounds count on about 3, And I said, wow, what's happening here? That was all in the third quarter. And the momentum just changed because we had done a great job on Romano. And so then as the game went on, I could see it. I thought, what in the world is he doing? I mean, why is he so biased? I didn't find this out until a year or so later. I found out this was his last game of officiating.
Oh.
He was retired. He was the county superintendent, I believe, of that county. He was that church, the Catholic Church, to be honest with you, was a part of the diocese. And he was not going to let them get beaten. Now, I'll say that. Now, this is things that shouldn't be said.
Right.
And these are things that I have never said to only a couple individuals. But that's the only game that I think that I can really say we got stolen. Now, that's a pretty strong statement for a guy to make when 71, and this is 1980 or 2017. But that's the only game I've ever felt bad about. When the game's over and you lost, you always got a lot of excuses. But that game, I think, was stolen.
Tell me about your relationship with Dan Wendell.
I don't know why that's important to you.
No, I just how you felt, because you two, it was, that was some good rivalry games.
You're asking questions that Faraday wouldn't get to ask.
And I promised you I'd stay on Faraday.
Yeah, how long did you work on these questions?
How long I work? I've been thinking about them for several weeks. You don't have to answer. I mean,
no, I don't have any.
Right.
Dan just came flying in there, and everything was.
But there was some good rivalry games.
Oh, they were good, and I guess I just never kind of liked some of their attitude. I didn't have anything personal against Dan. He did a good job, but I just thought maybe they were carrying the game a little beyond the high school basketball.
Well, let's the championship run. Did you ever think in your mind? I mean, at what part? Maybe after the Marian Catholic game, or playing the little non-conference schedule that you do. When did you feel like this team could go all the way? Did you ever have an inclination
I don't know. That's a long time ago, and I would say no, I didn't. Other than the fact that when we had done so well in 71, and we had done well in 72, that I knew if we're that good to keep winning, this team could win, because man, we these kids played hard. I don't think I ever had a bad practice in that year. A lot of times you have a bad practice and you get disgusted and you wonder what's going on. But these kids wanted to win, and so you just never knew. But every year, every game, there's always a battle. You can't look ahead to the state tournament when you haven't won the next game. You got to win the next game.
I mean, but did you ever say to Bob Guger or Doug at the time, if these guys keep playing
I don't think so. I don't think I ever looked that far ahead. But I would say we can beat that team next game. We can win that game. And then come the next game, never felt out of it. Never felt that we couldn't win that game.
Right.
And so I think it was just a one day at a time, one game at a time thing. And I never thought. Then we got down to the state tournament, and the team we were playing was 25-0, and they won it the year before, and we were 25-0. And I can still remember somebody knocking on the locker room door, and I was talking to the kids, and I said, "Go I don't want to talk to anybody." Well, he come back in. He said, "Oh, this guy really wants to talk to you." And I think he was from one of the newspapers. And he says, "You realize that there's no undefeated teams in the state but you two that are going to be playing here in the next few minutes, And I hadn't thought about that. We were both 25-0.
Right.
And that irritated me. The guy was just kind of like setting us up, I think. And so then it kind of dawned on me, man, we win one more game, we'll be the only undefeated team in either division, any of the divisions.
Yeah,
and that kind of, I just think back on those things. Some things stick in your mind. Other things more important than that happen, and they don't register. But that really registered in my mind that we're going to be undefeated if we meet this team.
Well, let's talk about Grenada Hutton, Indian Valley South.
Yeah.
Because there was obviously Charlie Huggins, the coach.
Yeah.
He had two boys that were playing, Harry and Bob.
Yeah.
And, and they were, like you said, they were undefeated. They had a big kid, big tall kid.
Bob didn't play in that game, I don't think. Wasn't Bob?
I
thought he was a year.
Was he older?
I believe he was out. But they had a big kid that was played in that middle. It was a handful.
And for a small, Class A school, I think he was, 6'7" or something.
Yeah,
he was a pretty big boy.
Yeah, he was.
And
then they had a good guard that was scored big the game before, I think. And there again, I think I had smart kids. So, when there are certain kids some years you tell kids what you want done and show them, and it doesn't work out, and other years it does. I can still remember in that ball game, I think we started. I thought maybe Max would guard this good guard man for man, and I saw early that wasn't it. So we went to our zone, and that big kid played in the middle of that zone. And I wanted Scott Ballinger, who had been playing point on offense for us, I wanted to drop back in front of him. And for some reason, it just took a couple times telling Scott that. Scott, what I want you to do. Finally, he comes to the timeout. He says, "Coach, I finally know what you want." And he just played a great game. And then Max, I got to tell you about Max. Max all year had never, I went back and checked the scorebook. There was never any time that he made 2 free throws consecutive the whole year. Even I went back to maybe he'd make one at the end of a game. Well, he missed the first one of the next. He never made 2 free throws in a row. And the scorebook will prove that to you. But, I don't know, you want to hear this whole story or not?
Oh, I got a follow-up to that.
Well, anyway, the nice spring day, we had the door open in the gym, the sun was shining in, and I tell the guys, 9 out of 10 twice. Suppose you made 9 out of 10 and you missed the last one. Well, if you did that twice, you're done. You made 8 out of 10 3 times, you're done. Well, everybody's down out of the gym but Max. Max is still shooting. So he starts to go slipping out, and I said, "No, wait a minute, Max. I'll tell you what's going to happen." Now, this was not just before the final game. This was during the straight state tournament run. I said, "I'll tell you what's going to happen, Max. You can't shoot free throws. You know you can't shoot them. You don't have any confidence. You can't decide how you're going to do it. And we're going to be playing in a tournament, in the state tournament. You're going to be at the free throw line. And I just say you're staying and shooting some free throws here till I tell you you're done, because it's going to be on your shoulders, not mine, when you miss those free throws." That's kind of my story.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know how many he shot, but he messed around and finally decided we were not going to shoot him a certain way. And come down to the state tournament, who's at the free throw line? And Max is making them. I think Max may have made, I don't know whether he made 9 that night or not that day, but the best he'd ever shot. Well, we got to game 1, and I'm looking around and talking to somebody on the bench about getting them in, and the crowd's laughing. I turned around, there Max is shooting at him. That was typical Max. But he had done his job, man. He drove. It was probably the best game, both offensively and defensively, he'd played.
In that final game.
Yeah. And
just as a sidebar, I'm on a plane from Chicago, I think it was, to Tampa many years ago. And I'm sitting aisle to aisle with Bob Huggins. And he was the head coach of Cincinnati Bearcats at the time. And he really ended up, we had a great conversation. So right before we jumped off, we're descending into Tampa. I said, I got to ask you something. Do you remember the 73 state championship game? And his eyes turned scowling. He says, my dad coached that team. I said, I know. I said, I went to that school that you lost to. He says, let me tell you something. That stuck not only in my family's crawl for years, but he said, then there was a guy at the end of the game shooting underhand free throws and made them both. And he said, that put the dagger in my dad.
Well,
and we smiled and we were joking about it. He goes, that's very interesting. He was going down to an AAU facility, to watch kids. And you could tell the change of just, we had a nice 20-minute conversation talking. Then I bring this game up and it just went.
That I believe every word you're telling me, because the kids have told me this through the years, that they would meet some of these guys on the team or talk to them, and they just were mean, would not talk about it, and just never had anything good to say.
And, and I think, it just goes back, but, to the point that it was one thing he shot him underhand, but the other thing was he made them both, and it was like.
Well, that was his old style. He went back to it.
And so anyways, it was, I just wanted to let you know that because I've had that story built in the back of my mind for all these years, and it kind of popped up on me a few weeks ago.
That's probably it, because, I can remember just Max and I left in the gym, and I said, Max, you're going to be at the foul line sometime. That's going to boil down to you making them. And of course, and it did. That proved to be true. Yeah.
I'm not gonna put you on the spot with this, but if you had to name in your time of coaching, maybe the 5 or 10 guys, not in any order, because that's not fair to any of them. But some of the guys that you coached that were probably just so coachable, knew they had a lot of talent. Is there certain guys that come to your mind right away?
Yeah, there are, but okay. I'm not going to name any of them.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, I can start right from my first year of coaching with the Leffler boys, and all right on up, Peacock and on down, and
there's probably too many.
Well, there are, and there's some of those kids that you do not. If I named some of them, you'd say, "Oh, who's that?" They haven't been the star players. They haven't been the people that everybody remembers.
Right.
But the old coach remembers them.
Right.
And I have never done a great job of going back and telling those kids those things, because you're coaching for the next year, and you're coaching, and now that I'm out of it for 30 years, I think of those things more than I did then, because back then, it's just one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
No one's ever good enough. You got to keep getting them better. You got to try and make them better, and so you're always on somebody. But when I think back, man, there were some awfully good, reliable kids, that may have not been the star, but they're the ones. You had to have five, and we at that time when we were pretty small, you had a hard time finding five. There's always somebody, and I did that on the other teams, tried to take advantage of somebody who wasn't quite good enough to be fifth man, but he had to be. And we had a lot of kids in the middle of the pack there that were very, very valuable.
Something I've always wanted to ask you, because obviously you grew up, in Marion. You coached there your whole time. Do you think that was a perfect fit for you and your family? Being like at a smaller type school, where there's 450 kids in the high school versus maybe you would have coached at, a larger school. Did you?
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean,
you're asking me again. You're asking me questions that no one has ever mentioned before, and I didn't think anybody who was not a part of coaching would even think about asking. So you're asking good questions. I had chances to go on,
right.
but I always feel there's only how many kids you got on your squad? About 12, 15. How many you going to have if you got in a school where there's 2,000 students? How many you going to have on your team? Same number. You don't have many more kids, so you're working with a certain group of kids, and my job is to coach them. And what is there any big other than trying to make a name for yourself? And that never interested me.
Right.
I also my parents lived within a couple hundred yards of me.
Right.
All right, my brother's a missionary, so he's never around. And why do I want to move somewhere else? And not going to make me any happier. Maybe make me some money or something more. But why wouldn't make me any happier? It was a good place for my family, right there in a little town of Prospect.
Yeah.
You can only teach so many kids in your class if you're enjoying teaching math. Okay, if you go to a big school, you probably won't teach anything. But you don't have so many students, so I never could see any big advantage other than maybe trying to make a name for yourself.
What did you think of Mr. Midland, the guys that you were around? It was probably a close-knit group for a long period of time.
Yeah, it was a good group.
And
I got to give a lot of credit to the coaches that Bob Gooker and Doug Lichtenberger they were very loyal. They were the kind of guys that worked hard in practice, did what I thought was the right things to do, and never had any problems. And I just got to give them a lot of credit. Yeah. And if you get to a big school again, everybody's wanting to fight to get the head job, or you can't. You can trust. You can't always trust everybody who works with you. These guys you can trust. Yeah.
And that's probably a comforting thing as you kept going, knowing you had that kind of backbone, not only with Pleasant itself, but people like Bob and Doug. That was probably a real help to you, and probably at the time, a lot of other people didn't realize the value of that.
No, and I probably didn't either till after it was over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you just think if somebody's working for you, you expect them to do a good job. But I find out afterwards that a lot of these coaches didn't do good jobs, and they didn't have good men behind them. And I was very, very fortunate to have people like that. Yeah.
If you had 3 things to say about how good of a coach you were, like number 1, I remember you were hell-bent on fundamentals, and you had to learn to play defense. And I know you still try to tinker with young kids today and teaching them. what would you say? I mean, if there were things that you probably stressed the most, was keeping the fundamentals, keeping it simple, learning, or you had the ability to adapt to a group of guys you had at that particular year. I mean,
Well,
could you kind of talk about that?
I can. You're catching me with questions again that I don't sit around here for the last 3 years thinking about these things. So I might not give you a good answer, but the reason I still helping down in Lakeland,
Mm-hmm.
I help with the girls and I help now with the boys. I hate basketball except for the fundamentals. I mean, if I could just go out and coach those fundamental things and get the kids to realize how important they are, I don't care for the game situations. I don't care for the now that's exaggeration. I do, but I mean the things that I enjoy. The things I enjoy is still teaching them the fundamentals. And I think these kids anymore, they play so much basketball, they are so talented, they can get by with a lot of things that maybe aren't fundamentally sound, but they could improve on. And so that's probably
a lost art.
Yeah.
The kids.
And I think it's hard for the kids to realize that, how important they are. And I think a lot of coaches, I'm talking about the high school level, I'm not talking about,
right.
They still don't realize those things. And then I think probably the best thing I did every year was able to adjust to what talent I had. You didn't see, if you go to a big school or a college, you come out and this is the kind of offense we're going to play, this is the kind of defense we're going to play, and you recruit to that. When you get out of high school, you're trying to find 5 players to play together. You may change from year to year. You may have kids that are talented at this or that, and you've got to take advantage of that, or you're not going to win. So I think that was one of the things that I got helped me get by.
Do you feel like, even being in a smaller school, it was easier for the kids to become a team, and rely on each other, and say not having, if you were a larger school, you may have had a couple guys hot dogging it, because it always seemed to be like your teams could mesh.
Well, the thing is, I can't answer that because I never had a big school, so I don't know.
Well, but
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you may be right, but I would think that if I had a bigger school, I still would find the kids that wanted to play and liked each other and wanted to learn. But the more kids you have, you may have to weed out more, but you're going to have a better chance of finding a half a dozen kids that play well together. So I think that should be a good characteristic for a coach in any size school.
If there was something that a lot of people don't know about you, what do you think the first thing that maybe a lot of people that you worked with at Pleasant, a lot of the students you had at Pleasant, a lot of the team, a lot of the basketball players you had at Pleasant, what was probably the biggest thing that people didn't know about you?
Now you're getting really pretty personal things here that I don't even know how to answer.
Well,
you don't know what people think of you. You don't know what. So I just, I can't think of what they.
That's a Faraday question.
Yeah. I think I could answer that, and I think I would like to answer that, but I don't think I want to answer it off the top of my head.
Okay, that's fine. That's
that's
good. What's always been your favorite color?
Color?
Yeah.
Well, my red probably, but my wife would probably say green. I don't know why. She'd always buy me something green. I think that was green.
She wanted you in green. That's interesting.
No, I don't.
See, I think that's something right there some people don't know. Your wife always wanted you to wear green.
No, she didn't want me to wear green. She just thought that was my favorite color. Because there were several things she said, or somebody asked that, and she'd say, "Well, it's green," and I don't know why it was, but because hers is blue, I know that.
Right. What do you enjoy now most? I mean, let's put family aside because I know you really appreciate your family, and other than golf, what do you enjoy most now? Because
I'm probably at the place in my life where I have no difference than when I was younger. But I have more time to not sit around, that's not a good word, to think. And I think back, and I could write a book on how the good Lord has led me in my life right from high school right on up till now. And I think I am more inclined to really give him credit for anything good that's happened in my life. There's more things that we could sit here and talk about how I started and got into coaching and all that. And I know you don't want to hear all that, but it's a one day at a time. You live your life the way you think the Lord wants you to live it daily. Everything's going to turn out just the way it should. And I think of that more and more because I can look back at when you're living your life daily, you don't know what the next day is going to bring. But when you do it and you come to the end of your years, as I about have, you realize how he's led you and you just didn't know it at the time. Does that answer your question?
Well said. Yeah. So you know what, pretty much at the end of the day, you can sit there and say, hey, this bucket list was pretty fulfilling that you did.
Well, again, you can look back and say, oh, man, how many mistakes I made. I could have done this better, or I could have done that. Then I think back, no, wait a minute, that time, in that situation, maybe the Lord knew more than I did, and that's really what happened this way. So I don't have any, I can't go back and have any regrets. Not more could have been done. A lot of things more I could have done personally for people. And right to this day, I don't do a good job, but I just don't have any regrets.
Mr. Kirby, thanks.